We're almost halfway through Battlefield 2042's first season, and I've got to say, it has surprised me. I didn't genuinely think the new map was going to keep me entertained for as long as it has, but considering how much better of a map exposure is compared to the base game ones, it's clear to see what's keeping at least some of the returning players entertained here. And because we're almost halfway through Season 1, I thought it would be a good time to discuss what we can expect from Season 2. I want to present my scenario of what I think DICE should be doing for this next season, and it's kind of based on new information that we've got from DICE and EA recently about the game. And I also want to speak about how important this season is likely to be if there is any sort of major revival on the cards for this game. But first, a quick word from our sponsor, Alienware, with their new Aurora R13 gaming PC. This thing is a big step up. It's bigger, it's better, it's cooler, featuring 12th gen Intel Core processors, NVIDIA GeForce RTX graphics, and a bold new design which you can opt to equip a windowed side panel with, so you can see all of your top tier components bathed in alien FX lighting if you want. New cooling called Cryotech, that keeps your components cool, working at their optimal performance level, giving you high frame rates in all of your favorite games, and the R13 features toolless graphical upgrades as well, so if you want to swap out your graphics card in the future, you've got confidence of an easy install down the road. For more information on the Aurora R13 from Alienware and to support the channel, click the link at the top of the description right now. Okay, so first of all, I want to say that I think DICE and EA are going to consider Season 1 a success when they look at the larger picture for Battlefield 2042. Before Season 1 launched, player numbers for Battlefield 2042 had all but flatlined. Websites like Steam Charts were showing just a few thousand players active at peak times for the Steam version of the game, compared to over 100,000 players at the peak during the launch week of 2042. Most players had just grown tired of waiting for new content to arrive, waiting for bug fixes to arrive, and generally waiting for the game to just be better than what it was. They'd taken off to play other games instead, and that's understandable because during the period after the launch and before Season 1, if you were still playing Battlefield 2042, you felt like a beta tester. DICE would update the game with a slew of fixes and quality of life changes that, by and large, should have been present when the game launched, but they weren't. And at the same time, they'd often manage to break stuff as well, so you definitely felt like a beta tester. Thankfully, when Season 1 arrived, despite what was, I think, an underwhelming amount of content, the content itself was actually pretty decent. The exposure map was a huge change in direction for map design for the game, taking absolutely no cues whatsoever from the launch maps and instead focusing on delivering a smaller map scale with large amounts of verticality and bringing infantry play spaces in with it. It's a great map, and as I said previously, to me it felt like a Battlefield 4 DLC map where the designers had been allowed a lot more freedom to create something that's much more unique and different, rather than the bland and boring, boxy feeling launch map offerings. Player numbers did rise significantly with that Season 1 content introduction, and they have stayed higher than the pre-Season 1 numbers ever since that point, but we've got the usual steady drop-off in player numbers that Battlefield always tends to have as people experience the new content, then they move away again because there's still a long time between the beginning of Season 1 and the beginning of Season 2. So this to me signifies what DICE needs to do with Season 2 fundamentally, and that's provide players with a more consistent flow of content as opposed to dropping everything at the start of the season and then just leaving players to their own devices for the next 12 weeks. Season 2 needs to build on the relative success of Season 1 by introducing new maps, reworking all of the base game maps, adding new and portal weapons into the game, tying in the new specialist with a complete specialist overhaul, and of course new vehicles that fit the theme as well. Now I say maps, plural, because the game needs more new maps to keep people entertained over a longer time period. A good framework might be to launch Season 2 with one new map, and then deliver a second new map halfway through, so maybe around week 6, maybe week 5, as a mid-season refresh, to give players time to play the new map at the beginning of the new season and really get to know it before being hit with a second new map later down the line. If we look at the player numbers chart again here for Season 1, you can see that by the beginning of week 6, which is on the far right hand side of the chart, player number peaks have fallen below half of what was recorded on day 1 of Season 1. And I think that shows that now would be a great time to introduce a second map, right around week 5 or week 6 into the season. Players who maybe spent more time playing at the beginning of the season have stopped logging in so frequently, so it makes sense to give them a reason to come back to the game. And secondly, again, I say maps plural because this is Battlefield. It's a game that's built on the success of its gameplay scope, and that in large part depends on the variety of maps on offer. Looking to the launch maps, we got a bunch of wide open spaces with no cover, no clear pathing, and generally no distinct gameplay flow. They were rubbish. Exposure is head and shoulders above the rest, and gameplay is far more entertaining, more engaging, and it's generally quite seamless. Maps can change everything in a Battlefield game. Season 2 needs to deliver more than one new map to continue adding to the group of maps that actually present good gameplay. Outside of Exposure, the only other good maps are, ironically, not Battlefield 2042 maps, but they're the Portal maps from Bad Company 2 and Battlefield 3. The Bad Company 2 maps actually got adapted and expanded to accommodate Conquest, and those are still country miles ahead of any of the 2042 launch maps. Battlefield is a AAA FPS franchise, and previous DLC updates used to deliver 4 maps apiece. So I expect more than one new map per season moving forward. And that opinion is kind of reinforced by the recent info that was released by DICE General Manager Rebecca Kutaz that almost the entire DICE studio and several other studios are still working on Battlefield 2042. So perhaps Season 1 was hamstrung by all of that fixing, quality of life, and important additions to bring 2042 up to the standard that it should have been at launch. But Season 2 needs to be a proper return to DICE DLC handling. Then we've got to talk about the reworking of base game maps. So far, none of that has reached the live version of the game. We've seen clips of the work that DICE is doing to improve Kaleidoscope by adding a lot more cover across the map, implementing a forward operating base location in the park, increasing the thickness of trees and bushes to cover sightlines, and more stuff like that. But so far, none of those changes have been added with a patch. Kaleidoscope is supposedly getting updated in August in the final couple of weeks of Season 1, and then renewal is scheduled to be addressed in Season 2. That pacing of updating the base game maps, it's far too slow, and it needs to be accelerated. The longer the process of updating older content continues, the longer the conversation around how poor that older content will continue. I think it's commendable that DICE is taking the time to go back and actually do this work. There's not many companies that would do that. But I personally feel quite shortchanged that the work is being incorporated into the seasonal structure of the game when that content has technically already been delivered with the launch of the game. It's being used as an element of the season, a way to sort of advertise it. Like sort of saying, look, more content, when actually it's content that we've already been given. I think DICE needs to remove the focus of those map reworks publicly and simply get on with the work in the background, delivering those as quick as they can, and instead they need to refocus attention publicly on the actual new content that they're going to be delivering. To be brutally honest, I don't care about the old maps anymore. You could remove them from 2042 and I wouldn't bat an eyelid, because they're so poor compared to what the team has produced for Season 1 with the Exposure map. New content is always going to be more interesting and eye-catching than old content. It's as simple as that. So as I mentioned, DICE needs to get those map reworks done and completed, all of them, within Season 2, so that they can simply get on with working on new content that themselves probably, and players, will actually care about. As for new weapons for Season 2, DICE has got a lot to improve on here. Season 1 delivered just 2 new weapons, which is frankly pitiful. However, both of those weapons did turn out to be pretty fun gameplay-wise. The BSMV Marksman Rifle was this shape-shifting, ultra-changeable weapon that could be really well customized, and the crossbow, which had somewhat of a cool factor about it. I've seen lots of clips with people pulling off some awesome stuff with that thing. But there was no new SMGs, no new assault rifles, new sniper rifles. There were no more pistols added to the game. We've only got 3 of them. Previous Battlefield games had like 8 or 9 at launch. Season 2 needs to begin with several new weapons being introduced via the Battle Pass as free tier unlocks for everybody. Perhaps a couple of them integrated into those weekly challenges that everyone can complete as a reward for completing that week's worth of challenges, and maybe even separate weapon unlock challenges available to everybody, but they're just sort of outside the scope of those weekly challenges. So let's say like getting 30 headshots with sniper rifles will unlock a brand new sniper rifle. Something like that. Season 2 needs to bring, I'd say, 4, maybe 5 brand new weapons at the beginning of the season, maybe 3 or 4 portal weapons thrown in alongside those, and then a couple of mid-season weapons that could be added like week 5, week 6 alongside that second new map being made available. This would massively bolster the weapon selection in the menu. It would give players more opportunities to progress within the game via the attachment unlocks and the mastery achievements, and perhaps most importantly, it would give players more gameplay variety. With just 21 primary weapons in Battlefield 2042, a game supposedly all about the tools, all about the sandbox, we've got surprisingly little to use, and the game would greatly benefit from having more weapons on offer for players to use. And then, Season 2 also needs to deliver the Specialist overhaul. Going back to early 2022, DICE confirmed they were working on a Specialist rework, and they said we'd hear about it a couple of weeks later. Well, nearly 6 months later, we still don't know what's going on, and arguably it's the biggest pressure point for players in this game. Whatever they're going to do to Specialists, again, like the work on the older maps for this game, this Specialist rework needs to be completed ASAP, so the conversation about old content and decisions being really poor can just finish, and the DICE team can then just move on to working on new content that, let's be honest, I think they'd all rather be working on instead. I personally think that Specialists should be separated into classes based on their attributes and have their second gadget slot locked down into selecting gadgets that actually fit that class role. Now you'll notice that's exactly how classes used to behave in previous Battlefield games. And that's not by chance, that's exactly how it should be. In my opinion, Specialists are one of the worst ideas ever to hit Battlefield as a franchise, which has always been a class-based shooter game built around teamwork and class interplay. Specialists remove all of that, and they make each character more selfish by being able to skirt around the old class identifiers and pick gadgets that make gameplay easier for them rather than easier for their squad. So DICE, just take us back to classes. They're better. Now, to be completely honest with myself, I don't actually see all of that happening for Season 2, based on the previous pace DICE has been working at and the pitiful amount of content that they delivered for Season 1. My expectations for Season 2 are really still down on the floor. But if DICE wants to be taken seriously, and they want Battlefield to start rising in people's estimations again, they've got to put their money where their mouth is, and they've got to do what they say they're doing, which is having everyone working on 2042. But we need to see some sort of result of that work. They've got to take 2042 seriously and treat it like a proper Battlefield game. Season 2 needs to build on that small success that they had with Season 1. But they've got to go big on content. Stop talking about how you're going to make the game better and actually make the game better. Deliver to players what they actually expect from a big AAA production. Deliver Battlefield 2042, because that's what we're all waiting for.